I'm Courtney Smith.
And I'm Elise Sharp.
And we are two nerds who are here to make Shakespeare easier to understand.
In this podcast, we will explore as many dimensions to Shakespeare's plays as we can by looking at the text, examining the historical context in which the plays were written, and how his plays are viewed through modern lenses of feminism, racism, classism, colonialism, nationalism, ableism, all of the isms.
We will discuss how his plays shaped both the past and present, and, as theater makers, how his plays can be responsibly performed today, all while trying our best to approach his works without giving in to Bardolatry.
So, Shakespeare, anyone?
Hi, listeners. Want to support Shakespeare Anyone? Visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. Now, onto the episode. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Courtney.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing okay today.
Yeah.
It's nearing the end of the Tempest series, and so...
It is the end of our Tempest series.
Oh my God, it is the end. I'm so shocked that we are, like you corrected me, at the end of the Tempest, which means we are wrapping up our entire 2025.
Yes, very soon. And preparing for the beginning of 2026. We're going to be on to a whole new place soon.
Whoa.
But yeah, today we are going to be looking at 3 different versions of Shakespeare's The Tempest that are available to watch online. We will be discussing the 2010 film by Julie Taymor. We will also be discussing a 2017 production by the Donmar Warehouse that was directed by Phyllida Lloyd and featured an all-female cast. And then we will be also discussing the 2013 production from the Globe featuring Roger Allam as Prospero. But before we get into that, I have some housekeeping. I don't know if you've heard, Courtney, but we were alerted to the fact that somebody we have talked about in wrap-ups before has a new memoir coming out and wanted to share it with our listeners in case anybody is interested. Sir Anthony Hopkins has written his first ever memoir, and he's actually written it. It's not a ghostwriter.
Which I love.
It's called We're Okay, Kid. It is out now. And in his memoir, he delves into his illustrious film and theater career, his difficult childhood, and path to sobriety in an honest, moving, and long-awaited memoir. Also, for our Shakespeare fans, Kenneth Branagh narrates the audiobook. However, Sir Anthony also recites some of his favorite poetry throughout the listening experience, and Shakespeare, Hamlet in particular, comes up more than once. So, if you are a big Shakespeare fan and want to read a little bit more about an actor whose work we have discussed in previous wrap-ups, specifically like our Titus episode.
And King Lear.
And who's just a giant in Shakespeare. This might make a great holiday gift, and you can support the podcast by picking up the book through our bookshop.org storefront. The link is in our episode description. If you shop through bookshop.org, you will also be supporting local indie booksellers. You can also support the podcast and get 2 audiobooks when you sign up for a new monthly membership using the link in our show notes through Libro FM. Libro FM also supports local bookstores when you purchase. Links to both are in our episode notes.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exciting to hear that people who work in Shakespeare, who we've talked about, are writing about that sort of thing. And I would love to try to get my hands on a copy as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on a copy. One of my favorite books that I read last year was Judi Dench's memoir, where she looked back at her experiences with Shakespeare. And I love listening to an audiobook memoir, like hearing somebody talk about their life. And so I might grab the audiobook personally. Now, let's dive into talking about some Tempest wrap-ups, starting with the 2010 Julie Taymor film, directed by Julie Taymor. This features an all-star cast. So we have Felicity Jones as Miranda, Reeve Carney as Prince Ferdinand, David Strathern as King Alonso, Tom Conti as Gonzalo, Alan Cumming as Sebastian, Chris Cooper as Antonio, Helen Mirren as Prospera, Ben Whishaw as Ariel, Jimon Hounsou as Caliban, Russell Brand as Trinculo, and Alfred Molina as Stefano. Whew.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge lineup.
Huge lineup.
And many of the actors that are in this lineup are really renowned Shakespeare actors.
Yes, or renowned theater actors.
That too.
There's a lot of like West End talent and a few Oscars in this.
Yeah, just a couple.
Just a couple in this cast. I saw this in theaters when it first came out, and I remember thinking back then that while I didn't think it was like perfect or great, my bar for Shakespeare on film, and specifically like film adaptations of Shakespeare, was so low that I was like, well, this is like better than some I've seen.
Mm-hmm. And what is it?
What is it now?
Yeah. Overall reaction today.
Overall reaction today was I struggled with this one even more than I did in the past. There's some things that have not aged well, and there's some things that I still disagree with. For me, in general, there are some highlights, but there's sort of an overall like blah-ness to this one for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, and I have not seen this one before, I think that for me, the beginning was so strong. The cinematography, the like intercutting of different groups, all of that was just so magical. And I really enjoyed the setup of Prospera's magic. I think it was just cinematic beauty. Yeah, leaning into like the alchemy and like the very learned kind of magic.
I also love seeing Miranda see the storm from afar. To me, it's like a question for productions is like, how many times has Miranda seen a ship pass by and tried to wave at it or tried to observe it and like get it to come save them and help them? And if this is the one time that her father has raised a sea storm.
Her mother.
Or in this case, her mother, her parent. Thank you. If this is the one time that her mother, in this case, has raised a sea storm and absolutely destroyed their chances at being rescued in Miranda's point of view at top of show, is an interesting question to consider for Miranda's motivations in that first scene.
Yeah. So that's kind of my overall, like at the beginning, super invested, super ready for a fantastic film. I mean, it's also a Taymor film, so there's a lot of creative choices in terms of cinematography, a lot of playing with Ariel, the shipwreck, imagery. And then I think in the middle and to the end, it's a blob of uncertainty about what to do with the text.
Unspecificity with the text.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
There's a lot of actors saying words, and it doesn't really seem like there's any intention behind those words. There's also, we've talked about it in one of our episodes, that the technique that she used for Ariel, which is that she filmed Ben Whishaw separately and then projected him, or like did film on top of film. Sometimes it's effective. Sometimes it's really cool how Ariel appears, especially Ariel's first appearance is like in a puddle of water.
Yes.
Ariel being very of the elements is cool, but there are times where it really impedes Ben Whishaw and Helen Mirren's ability to connect as Prospera and Ariel. It doesn't really feel like they're acting with each other in many scenes. And then there's times where like the Ariel effect will be just like, for me personally, taken too far, where it's like, I didn't need a shot of Ariel like flying away. You know, that's just me personally.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, Ariel being superimposed was, I guess, it reminds me of the reliance that a lot of modern filmmakers have on CGI.
Yes.
And the kind of disconnect that can exist versus the practical effects, where it does aesthetically look cool, but it's like, what is this doing to help besides looking cool?
Yeah.
What did you think about Prospera? We talked in one of our episodes about the sexist reaction that a lot of critics gave about like focusing mostly on her motherhood versus like her actual magic.
Yeah, I think something that rewatching this brought up for me is that Taymor also makes some choices to remove the power from Prospera. She alters Prospera's backstory so that she is married to the Duke of Milan and is supposed to inherit the power, but then her husband's brother is, like, that's the relationship to Sebastian. And to me, that was also sexist. Like, why couldn't Prospera be the Duke of Milan?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why did we have to remove her? It made the usurpation more abstract to me and kind of put her in like, oh yeah, she was just like a lady scientist. And maybe Sebastian had a valid reason to usurp her.
Yeah, like she wasn't qualified necessarily to rule the country because she's a scientist. And like there's a shot of her doing her scientific magic.
Mm-hmm.
And then baby Miranda is in like a crib. And so she's dually doing her scientific magic research and like rocking the crib.
Yeah. So I also think that like Taymor focuses on her motherhood more than her magic.
Another thing I noticed about Prospera is that there's this kind of skirts to pants to skirts costuming choice, where she as the like lady scientist, and I'm not using it like sexistly. Like we when we say lady scientist, we're making fun of the trope that exists when people talk about women in certain professions.
Women in STEM, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's very much what it seems like Taymor is playing into with at least how the nobles saw and their reasoning for. This is sort of like our understanding of like why Sebastian usurped her, was this view of her as just a scientist who wasn't really respected.
A politician.
Or
yeah.
Neither her science nor her politics were respected.
Yeah. And then we see her in the flashback. She's wearing a skirt. And then on the island, we know Prospera as this like dominating magical ruler of the island, and she wears pants. And then once her revenge plot is over and she's like forgiven all of the nobles, forgiven her brother-in-law, she then goes back to Milan wearing a skirt. Like there's a whole costume change from the pants of the island to the skirts of Milan.
Right. So I also go, well, Taymor did put this in here, this focus on her femininity and motherhood, and does put it into a spotlight. So I do understand why those critics responded the way that they did.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about Prospera. We've talked about Ariel. Let's talk about the other really big feature of our season, which is Caliban.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Caliban was played by a Black actor, and he's a very talented actor.
Mm-hmm.
The choice was very native to the island.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I was like, fantastic. We are dealing with colonialism. This is going to be a conversation about post-colonialism and Caliban in this very interesting way. And for me, that did not happen.
Yeah. I think that we have this very talented Black actor. They have also made him up with prosthetic makeup to have been physically disfigured to the point that, like, my husband watched this with me and was like, oh, is that the pinch? Have they done that? What they have done is create a Caliban who it is very clear has been traumatized by Prospera and Prospera's punishments. I thought that was clear, but I agree that like any sort of analysis of Ariel and Caliban and what does it mean to be native to this place versus not was not accomplished.
And on top of that, later down the line, during Caliban's plot to usurp Prospera for Stefano, very much read to me like white savior and kind of like human zoo between those characters. And I know it's in the text that Stefano and Trinculo have beer and Caliban is very interested in this beer. But it read to me like the gods must be crazy. And in the text, he does look to Stefano as the like, this white man is going to help me. But it just like felt like it leaned into and validated the white saviorness of introducing the native on the island to beer and then that person being a god. And then also there were some pieces that felt like Stefano and Trinculo were ogling at Caliban in a way that to me read very like human zoo of the 1800s, early 1900s, which I know can sound kind of contradictory in the sense that it's in the text, but you can also have a dialogue with it in modern adaptations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Stefano does have language where he talks about bringing Caliban back and putting him in a human zoo, showcasing him as an oddity. And it's, you know, it's pointed language towards like people in England will pay to see another human being who looks different, but will not help their fellow man. So that language is in there. And I agree that it was very much played like surface level And that's, I think, something that's like criticism of this being just sort of like blah, blob in the center of like there's just superficial choices made for a lot of these like major plots.
Especially in a time where we have so much very critical academic work about these particularities in the play.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the process for creating this. I don't know the dramaturgical work that was put into this particular film. But I imagine if there was more research done, we would find something that was less surface level, that was deeper, more nuanced, was maybe investigating this in a way that was more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And like Julie Taymor is a very creative, intelligent filmmaker. So it's disappointing.
Yeah. You expect a little bit more from her.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got two more pieces and then I want to get to some highlights.
Yeah.
One of them is that I did not like Russell Brand, and this is before we've learned that Russell Brand is not the best person in the world. The second thing is that the Miranda and Ferdinand plot was very surface level as well. While I was watching one of the scenes, this thing popped into my mind that was like, Ferdinand would definitely invite a girl into his dorm room, pull out his guitar, and sing "I Will Follow You Into the Dark."
That's so funny. Because to me, because it's Reeve Carney, who like is a singer-songwriter who had a jazz-infused rock band.
I did not know this about him.
Yes.
And I can see then why they would bring in one of the Fool's songs from Twelfth Night and have Ferdinand sing this song to Miranda. I think, was it around the time of the court mask that was omitted and just transferred into something else? Either way.
Yeah, which was also wild because Carney is such a good singer. If anyone is familiar with Hadestown, he originated the role of Orpheus.
Okay.
So he can sing that. I felt like they did not set him up very well, and they just had him, both he and Felicity, who plays Miranda. I'm like, I know these actors to be better than they were directed to be.
Yeah.
Like, there's no humor. Ferdinand is funny. Miranda is funny. Their courtship is funny and charming, and there's nothing.
No young love, no awkward love, no funny love. But anyways, those are some things that were some head tilts for me, some disagreements, perhaps.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those. Not great. I would say my highlights, though. I do like Alfred Molina in this as Stefano, Alan Cumming, and the nobles in general. There's a moment where we get to the first like noble scene, and I breathed a sigh of relief because I was like, Alan Cumming knows what he's saying and is delivering these lines like he knows what he's saying.
Yes, I wrote in my notes that like I could just watch the nobles with Sebastian and Antonio plotting to overthrow Alonso.
Yeah.
I would be super invested in a full movie of that.
Yeah, Alan Cumming and Chris Cooper are so interesting to watch. And I would also say that David Strathairn actually breaks my heart as King Alonso when he thinks his son is dead. So for me, the nobles are a highlight of this, but that is it.
Yeah, and for me, I agree, the nobles. And then, like I said, the setup was so interesting and beautiful and made me have high expectations that were not met.
And then there's no epilogue. The epilogue is the credits song, but it's not Prospera. So we don't really fully get all the catharsis, but at least we have Alan Cumming and the nobles.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. Anything else?
At the end of these, we ask ourselves, would we show these to students?
No.
No, I think maybe a scene.
I would maybe show a nobles scene.
A noble scene or an early magic scene.
Maybe the Tempest.
Maybe the Tempest, yeah. Just to show how Shakespeare and cinema can work together visually.
Yeah.
But for a classroom, I would not recommend.
I agree. Next, we will talk about the Donmar Warehouse 2017 production. This was directed by Phyllida Lloyd, featuring an all-female cast, and it is set in a women's prison. It is part of a trilogy of productions that featured the same cast that were all set within a women's prison, where the actors are playing prisoners who are performing the play and, quote, discovering themselves in the process, unquote. This is the third installment of this production trilogy, and the prior to that Phyllida Lloyd worked with this same cast were Julius Caesar in 2013, Henry IV in 2016, and then this production of The Tempest in 2017. And this was known collectively as the Shakespeare Trilogy.
Yeah. And during the 2020 lockdown, when I was doing Shakespeare Sundays or Shakespeare Saturdays, whatever I did before the podcast, my Shakespeare fix, I watched the Julius Caesar because it was available on PBS. And I remember enjoying that production. When I was watching it, I had far less knowledge about Shakespeare. I had read Julius Caesar in 10th grade English Lit, but I remember enjoying it. We were talking beforehand about our general enjoyment of this particular production. While it was not at all my favorite of the three, I enjoyed it more than you did. And we wondered if my previous exposure to the Julius Caesar impacted that.
Yeah, I left myself wondering if I would have enjoyed this more had I seen it in the context of it being a trilogy. I went into this knowing about the setting, knowing about sort of this like conceit of we are actors playing prisoners who are performing Shakespeare plays, and that was it. And I did some reading and read that like the Julius Caesar and the Henry IV were particularly effective. I struggled with this out of that context.
And I also did struggle with this particular production as well. But I had exposure to the previous production, and I think that was like an easier entry point for me. Yeah, like as you mentioned, it's set up with this concept that the actors are women prisoners and they are performing this production. And this is obvious in the costuming. The characters all wear like gray sweats or t-shirts and pants that are reminiscent of what women would wear in a women's prison. The sets are very minimalistic, designed to make us think of like prison cells or the mess hall or a courtroom or trash cleanup. When they have props, they're very like
they're minimal.
Or they're minimal.
Or found object. Yeah,
exactly.
I also think it's important to note at the very end of this, there is a blurb about the inspiration behind this production. This production was inspired by a shared creative process between prisoners, actors, and the production team in association with the theater company Clean Break and the York St. John University Prison Partnership Project. So there is a inspiration behind this that is coming from actual women prisoners.
The production starts with Harriet Walter giving a monologue about her story. She's playing a prisoner named Hannah, and then goes into like reading a book, and then there's some effects happening, some very minimalistic lighting effects, and then Harriet is Prospero. And the storm is created through like Prospero reading in what we see as her cell. And other actors are banging on cell doors, like around the theater, up at the top of the seating, the house. They're banging on cells and making noise, making commotion. And so it's like giving us the illusion of this tempest.
And I also understand that like all three pieces in this trilogy started with an actor reading a monologue, introducing themselves as a prisoner and sharing what is possibly like a real or adapted story from a real prisoner. That's what sort of sets up as who they are in this. So again, that's where I was like, I would get this conceit a little bit more if I saw more of these. I did find that minimal Tempest to be interesting and effective for what it was for this production. Something that this production I found really focused on was the island is full of noises. The entire production design is heavy on what are those noises and how much noise is in this island that is the prison.
Let's see. We talked about the Tempest. We talked about Ariel, Prospero in the previous one. So what are your thoughts on some of these?
For me, I enjoyed Ariel's songs. They're very fun. I struggled with the delivery of a lot of the language. And this is across the board. There was not a lot of variance in how these actors said lines, and there was a lot of just yelling their lines at each other. Because of that, I struggled to really see differentiations between characters. And when we've got what started to feel to me as like prisoner drag, this sort of like costume affectation of being a prisoner. It felt to me, assuming best intentions, a less empathetic portrayal of prisoners than I think granting these people a lot of empathy myself and like thinking that they had best intentions to like highlight women in prison. To me, it sort of painted women in prison with a very broad brush.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing you, and I'm like, I wrote in my notes, the highlights of this production for me were some of Harriet Walter's monologues as Prospero, and the secondary and tertiary characters to me felt very minimized and not specific. And then also there are just textual problems of, there's just a lot of things that are not great about these characters. We discussed in the alchemy magic, like the research that was done about how like Prospero is cleansing these base characters and turning them golden. And in a play that has so many base characters, it can be difficult to maybe interject that empathy, perhaps, or you can use a broad brush, or it can highlight some of the worst stereotypes in prisoners because the characters themselves are identified as being base, needing cleansing.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of language in this play about liberty, about being imprisoned, that this setting highlights, but then doesn't really do anything with.
Yeah, my weakest character here was Caliban. I did not understand Caliban.
I'm actually really upset about Caliban in this one.
And Ariel was a very, like, charming, fun actor, but this imprisonment that you're talking about, it's a perfect opportunity to talk about, say, Prospero's authority over Ariel and Caliban and make those two characters the central feature of this idea of imprisonment. But the play, this production, was so centered on Harriet Walters, and I liked her performance, but because the time wasn't taken into Ariel or Caliban, there was missing pieces.
I found that Harriet Walters was really able to give Prospero the like anger that Prospero has, but I struggled to connect that like Prospero in this is a prisoner who is playing pranks on her fellow prisoners and is seeking revenge on people who are newly imprisoned, who she has a past with, and then is also dealing with her own feelings about being imprisoned on this island. And part of this play is Prospero seeking this revenge, but also finding the ability to forgive and choosing to rejoin society. And so I was like, I understand this concept with the idea of like Prospero being trapped on an island, Prospero not being part of society. But when the choice is made that like Ariel is sometimes going to transform into a corrections officer to torment others, and like there's this fluidity with like who Ariel is, that was something that I wish the like what is possible in this world. And I feel like just the framing device could have been stronger maybe to help us understand what is the magic, what is the pretend, and what is the reality of this world. And then there were changes to the text that were very interesting to me, of like what was changed and what was kept. Everything about, especially in regards to Caliban and the Stefano and Trinculo, Caliban has a lot of language thrown at that character about being a slave, and we heard every single one of those. But then we change Trinculo's line about Caliban not smelling like a fish, and instead of saying not of the newest porridge on, we say not of the newest like kind of fish, or something like that was the line. And I was like, why make the effort to change that when we're not going to change like Milan, when we're not going to change other things to like fit the world that we're in? And then I really struggled at the end because there was no forgiveness for Caliban. There was no catharsis at the end of the Caliban arc. Prospero really had no remorse and didn't seem to learn anything. Caliban, at the very end, just lunges at Miranda again, and then a group of the cast just shoves Caliban away. And that was it. And I was so upset because there's some sort of absolution that like happens with Caliban at the end, and that was cut.
Take a deep breath, Elise.
And again, like I felt like Caliban was never a threat, to the point that the line in the mask of Prospero remembering the plot and like getting distracted, that was cut. And Prospero just freaked out and started destroying the mask from her own internal reaction to what the mask was showing. So again, like Caliban's not been anything other than a nuisance in this, and then we don't even get reconciliation or catharsis over the ending of that plot. It was very...
Oh yeah, it was... Caliban was this thing that even now thinking back on it, I'm like, I actually don't know what happened with Caliban. Caliban just had kind of a Eeyore kind of dopiness to their character. And then at the end, they were shoved away. And again, you mentioning just how much the play talks about imprisonment and liberty, and the fact that one of the characters with the strongest claim to the island is basically set aside. For what purpose? I don't know. I know that the opening is, this is Hannah's story, this real life prisoner, or maybe an adaptation or some fictionalized version. But because of that choice to make Prospero the central figure, I mean, and Prospero is the central figure of the play, but the choice to basically make the whole play about Prospero and not even consider some of these characters, it was like just so much interesting stuff was eliminated or underplayed.
Yeah. And again, I looked up, I was like, am I reacting to this with like the space of, this was 2017, it is now 2025, almost a decade after this. So I looked up reviews to just be like, what was being said contemporarily? And I think that I'm going to quote from a Variety article written by Matt Truman in 2016, where he acknowledges that Phyllida Lloyd's all-female Shakespeare's, the earlier productions, were dismissed as gimmicky, but says that gender-blind casting is, by 2016, 2017, had become very normalized. And Truman notes that, quote, Lloyd's trilogy set in a women's prison is stuck with a framing device it no longer needs, unquote. And that's kind of what I felt with, like, this, for me, this sort of lives, is that I feel like perhaps this framing device was more successful with Henry IV and Julius Caesar, and that the layers get muddied with this play. Truman also notes that, like, this was a different space than the other two. That sort of creates problems that the other productions didn't have. And, quote, rather than a prison serving as a theater, the Donmar's new pop-up space is a theater dressed as a prison. The difference is fine but fatal. Rather than prisoners playing Shakespeare, we see actors playing prisoners, especially when the Tempest breaks its own rules. Adding high-tech elements to handmade props, Chloe Lamford's design gives up the conceit. If prisoners had cash for disco balls and projectors, they mightn't be battling staff shortages and riots. Minor inconsistencies break the spell, unquote. And I think that's kind of where I live with this one, is that there's so many inconsistencies throughout. There's really great design elements, like the mask is balloons where images of the outside life are projected, and it's beautiful and interesting. But again, it's like, we're in, like, where are we? What are the power dynamics? There's, I think, a really good moment of the banquet. Ariel makes the nobles imagine their lavish lifestyles outside of prison and, like, what their lives were. And, like, that's such an interesting take on what this banquet could be. But what are we saying about the power of specifically Walter's character, the prisoner character, and Prospero?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that speaks to what I was trying to say, is like the power dynamics are so muddied, and clarity would help, and maybe some more consciousness about what you're trying to accomplish in a play that has many, many, many imprisoned characters. Miranda, Ariel, Caliban. Prospero is also, in a sense, imprisoned, but he's also the person who imprisons. So, yeah, some half-baked ideas that have some cool effects, some cool moments, but overall, shrug.
Yeah, and at the end we are left with everyone being free, except for our Hannah prisoner character, and the actor who plays Caliban is also still in prison, although possibly as a staff member, janitor.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, and everyone else leaves, but, comes back and visits.
Yeah, it felt very Wizard of Oz, like, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there.
I'll miss you,
And all
Hannah.
the people,
Yeah.
yeah, and they're all really encouraging to
Yeah.
this Hannah character. Like, we can't wait to see you on the outside, but from top to bottom, a bit muddied with choice.
Yeah.
Would you recommend this one to students in a classroom?
At this point, no, unless you were specifically like studying Shakespeare and this lens of like carceral justice. And then I would maybe be like, watch the trilogy, because I also understand that, like, we've seen this Hannah character through the other two plays up until this moment.
Yeah, because Harriet plays the main characters. Yeah.
So we've seen like this prisoner character, and like maybe there's a bigger payoff if you're not experiencing the third of these outside of the context. So I would say outside of a very specific classroom context, I wouldn't recommend it.
Same. It should be like an interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah. Or if you're looking for inspiration for a minimalist production of The Tempest and like ideas for how you can stage it, maybe that's a reason to watch it. All right.
Okay. So now it's time for our final The Tempest of the episode.
Yes, this is the Globe Theatre in 2013. It features Roger Allam as Prospero, Jessie Buckley as Miranda, and Colin Morgan as Ariel, as well as a broader cast.
I will say straight away, this was my favorite of the three that we watched. I think that there is a really nice payoff, I think, to doing The Tempest in a more elaborate kind of maximalist way, which is funny for me to say that when the Globe usually does minimalist sets, minimalist most everything. But there was a kind of, for me, like maximalist to the magic without it being, for theater.
Yes.
I don't know if that contradiction makes sense if you know the Globe's framework.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not the most minimal Globe production. It's towards their, like, more designed, more set, more effects, costumes. This was also my favorite of the three, primarily because I could understand every single word that was being said. That's the bar.
Yeah. I do think that creatives sometimes forget that, like, the biggest barrier to entry for audiences is not whether or not people understand your concept designs, but rather if they understand the words that are coming out of the actors' mouths.
Yeah. And the podcast right there. Okay.
Yeah. That's our favorite.
This was the only one that did the entirety of 1-1. And they had a model boat that came in through the audience and up on stage. And it was very simple. We saw actors, pretending they were on the boat, and then we saw the boat. And it was effective and simple.
Yeah. The choreography for the storm started out like very micro, where like on the stage, there were actors, as you said, reacting as if they were on the top of the boat. Like it's the boatswain and the crew trying with ropes, acting as though they were trying to move and control the ship. And then the nobles enter. And then they go macro. And that's when, as you said, there's a ship brought out from the yard and it goes onto the stage. And the actors on stage continue to dramatize the wreck as if they're being flung into the ocean. And it was effective. It was simple. It reminded me of Henry V, the choreography that was done for the battle. I think it was Agincourt, but the simplicity and the specificity of the choreography is super effective. So you do not have to be Julie Taymor's like giant visuals.
Yeah. Or Phyllida Lloyd's conceptual.
Yeah.
And I think they also do a great job of not making Prospero a jerk. The Which Thou Forget's section with Ariel, skipping ahead a little bit, but like the Which Thou Forget's section with Ariel was so clear, and they play that Ariel did indeed forget. It wasn't Prospero yelling at Ariel or chastising Ariel. It was like, you do this. And Ariel's like, what? Algiers? Like, it was something that was hard for Ariel to remember. And I was like, this is great. Like, they have tension in their relationship. And there is, like we talked about in our episode on the magic, Prospero does have to work at getting Ariel to work with him. But Prospero isn't a jerk. He's not mean. And he's also, a decent father to Miranda. Like,
Yeah. How hard is it for people to make the fathers decent to their daughters? And of course, we understand that there are fathers who do very bad manipulative things, but there should be that underlying, the dad does actually care about their daughter in a way that's not super cruel.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to hate the father. Yeah. And I would say, too, that the way that they developed the Ariel Prospero relationship really helped to counter the Prospero Caliban relationship.
Yes, they were very distinct. They used the set effectively and they used costumes effectively. So Ariel was like climbing the set to appear, whereas like Caliban entered from a hole in the ground that was hidden by a rock.
Yeah.
And their physicalities were very different, and just everything really separated the two and really made the relationships distinct and clear.
Yeah. And this Caliban, though still ape-like, was more of the earth. Like you mentioned that Caliban came out of a hole underneath the stage disguised by a rock. And the Globe did this interesting choice of taking the colors of the columns and painting down the column onto the ground and then onto rocks that were built around the column to give this kind of image, this suggestion of an island.
Yeah.
And Caliban's costume was that kind of spattered red, very like...
He seemed to be covered in the dirt of the island and also some dried blood and...
Yeah. And the colors were inspired by the colors of the columns.
Yeah. And you said more ape-like. I also found him to be more based in like a clown tradition, like a traditional clowning tradition in his portrayal of Caliban, not necessarily purposely trying to be ape-like. Like there wasn't like aping an ape. It wasn't like doing an ape impression, but it was very grounded. It was very, to me, it seemed more like from a classical clowning tradition.
Yeah.
But he is also characterizing as like some sort of like lesser humanoid creature. And he continues to play Caliban being newer to speech.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction you made because reviews also mentioned him being ape-like and I saw ape-like, but also he was wearing trunk hose. So a very early modern puffy short that was not reminiscent of, say, Julie Taymor's Caliban wearing the loincloth. Yeah, it was rooted in Elizabethan rather than an island far away with people who do not look like Elizabethans.
Yeah. He, to me, seemed more from a place of like, what if this is a clown character because it's with the clowns? And then what if this is also somebody who's just new to speech? This is like a post-colonial read that is like, let's undo that idea. What if the native to this island looks like he could be Prospero's son? It was also seemed to be that they were pumpkin pants. They were very worn. Probably this is like a hand-me-down from Prospero from when Caliban was in Prospero's good graces.
Yes. Yeah, I also want to mention too Ariel's costume because you mentioned we were talking about Caliban's costume, and Ariel similarly had this kind of like, for me, I read it as part of the island, part like Western influence from Prospero because like his top half had bird-like, feather-like design
of the air,
and then the bottom half was like earth-colored, like tan sand-colored pants that were not like tight like an Elizabethan's, but it looked like it could be influenced. Like there's this combination of earth meeting Prospero's kind of quote unquote civilizing of the island.
And then like Prospero and Miranda were in very like tan. Again, it appeared to be like these are the garments that they have.
Yeah.
And in that way, like Caliban seemed more closely tied to them, except he was like, what if he was attired in clothes that were brought with Prospero and Miranda those many years ago, and he had some prosthetic like scarring and scrapes on him, so also like
the pinch.
I thought that was like pretty effective. And then it very distinctly contrasted them with the Neapolitans, the nobles, when they came ashore in like velvet and historically like not necessarily pumpkin pants, but like, you know, a few...
What would have been fashionable around the time period that the play was written.
Yeah. That made them very distinct on the island, which was very effective. And We got a great young love in Ferdinand and Miranda. Ferdinand is such a dope. Like, he
Yes.
is so, like, no brain cells.
No, except the one brain cell is Miranda.
The one brain cell is Miranda. They're funny.
They're very funny.
This is the one where it's also, out of all these, that was the funniest. It's a comedy. Everybody had moments of comedy.
Yes. And Miranda was such a go-getter. They very much blocked Miranda to basically defy her father completely with Ferdinand. This like forbidden love, you know, even though Prospero is technically
pulling the strings,
manufacturing everything. Yeah, yeah. But it was just so refreshing. It was so refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
I also loved the clowns.
Yes.
I thought they were so funny. Trinculo wringing out his codpiece when he got onto the island was very funny.
So
he looks like a certain kind of clown.
He looks like a court jester, which he is written as. Yeah.
Yes. Stefano was so funny. He was also in Henry V. He played Bardolph in the production of Henry V that we talked about. And there was such a hilarious choice with the fish description of Caliban about how much it's about his scent. But then also the four-legged monster bit was so reminiscent to me of a Monty Python skit.
It was a really good four-legged monster segment, and it was active. It wasn't just them laying there. They are both like terrified of each other and like tug-of-warring over the gabardine and like revealing themselves and like not being completely hidden and just being so like in their own world, and Stefano's like watching it. And it was really effective. And I was like, this is a great gabardine.
Yeah, active is a great word for this production.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing I noticed about the text from this play is this emphasis on like ancient. And there was a lot of nods to like what the island was beforehand, like during the banquet scene. Ariel is costumed as this ancient bird, a possible like dinosaur.
Yeah, the interpretation of the harpy is very literal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same thing with Prospero's spirit dogs. During that chase, they are puppets. They're skeleton dogs. Again, this idea of like an ancient island. And it was cool too because later on in Prospero's rough magic speech, he says demi-puppets. And I was like, oh, puppets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting and intentional design choices for a high concept design production.
Yeah. For me, it was across the board enjoyable. One final moment that I want to talk about is a choice I thought was very good and that I haven't seen before. At the end of the play, Prospero says, you know, do all this, Ariel, and then, you know, be free and fare thou well, and then breaks his staff right before going into the epilogue. And the moment that he broke his staff, he could no longer see Ariel, and then was sort of in the globe and sort of lost and needing the audience to set him free. Like this actually did do something to him. We got to see him realize the immediate implications of giving up his magic, and then the epilogue was very effective.
Yeah. I will say too that like this choice that you're mentioning, I think that this choice really gave the actor this moment to really contemplate. When he returns to Milan, every third thought will be about death. And I'm like, this is Shakespeare's last play, and he was going to retire to Stratford. Is this something that maybe Shakespeare was thinking about? Was like, once I return to Stratford, retiring from the theater, every third thought I have is going to be about death because
what's the next thing for me?
What's next? Yeah. And they didn't imply, the production did not imply that Prospero is Shakespeare, but the influence that a playwright would have on their characters sparked something for me.
Same. It just felt very connected. And this is, you know, like you said, it's the Globe's framework is trying to connect it to possibly what it could have been for Shakespeare's audiences. And this one I truly was like, yep, achieved that mission.
Yeah.
Would you recommend this one in a classroom?
I think that I would.
I think I would too.
No, I know that I would.
Yeah.
I would. Maybe not the whole production because it's very long, but definitely very powerful scenes, very interesting choices. And I think it could spark for particularly students of like costume design or students just generally studying Shakespeare as like, what can you do to adapt it?
I also think just a general like Shakespeare class gets students to understand how a play is different than a novel. this is a really good example of here's what it's like to hear this out loud. Because again, everyone is so clear in their language. It is easy to understand. It does the job of Shakespeare is already accessible. You just have to say the words like you know what you're saying.
Yes.
So like that's where I would use it, sort of in like a general Shakespeare, like you've read The Tempest as a piece of literature and you want to show it as a play. This is a great choice for that.
Yeah, the politics are clear. There are words that just stand out, like noble. I've never heard Miranda talk about noble. Like, it's in the text, but like noble stood out, ancient stood out, fish, like it's just overall what you're saying is so true. So thank you, Globe Theater.
Yeah. Let's get into some of our favorites across all three.
Yes. So if Elise and I could cast a production of The Tempest using elements of each of these productions, which ones would we choose as our favorites? So I have for us to consider The Tempest, the staging and the choreo of The Tempest, Prospero, Caliban, the magic, and then each of the plots between Prospero's revenge, Miranda and Ferdinand's courtship, the nobles, and the clowns.
All right.
The Tempest, the Globe is my favorite.
I agree. The Globe is my favorite. I hear everything. I see everything. I get it. It doesn't need to be more than that.
Yeah. As much as it's very neat when it's Shakespeare on film, sometimes you don't need all of that. Yeah.
And I think that while Phyllida Lloyd's Tempest is very interesting, I feel like it was not clear that it was a sea storm. The high concept, it doesn't need to be high concept.
Yeah. Sometimes I think creative people need to go, if I have no relationship to this text, if I've not read it, if I've not seen anything, would I get it? And use that as a baseline.
Yeah. Wow. The bar is so low. What was the next one? Favorite Prospero?
Favorite Prospero.
Or Prospera?
Or Prospera.
I'm going to go with the Globe because, again, it was just such a Prospera who wasn't just all about revenge and who wasn't just ordering Ariel around, who wasn't just mean to Caliban. It was a more complex Prospero.
Yeah, I agree. I did write at first that Julie Taymor's Prospera in the beginning I was so invested in, and then that fell off. So as an overall Prospero, it's definitely the Globes. And the reconciliation in the Globes tore at my heartstrings.
Oh, yeah.
There's payoff for having a consistent through line from top to bottom of the play.
Imagine.
Favorite Caliban?
If I could combine the Globe and Julie Taymor, I think that would be my favorite, just because I do respect Jimon Hounsou so much, and think that he did a really good job with what he was told to do. He so beautifully delivers the like yearning of Caliban. That's like the one thing I would add into the Globes. I think overall the Globes was like very refreshing of like, oh, you're doing something different to me.
Yeah. Originally I put Julie Taymor's, and then things transpired, and then the Globe became my favorite. But I think you're right. Something mixing the two together, like the best parts of the Globe's Caliban with the best parts of Julie Taymor's. So the favorite magic.
I'm going to go with the Globe.
Interesting. I put in my original notes Julie Taymor's film because I loved Prospera's art. I thought it was so beautiful, the way that the cinematography was able to play with like the constellations and astrology and the grimoire alchemical.
Oh yeah, now that you say that, that's beautiful.
Yeah. But I think from start to finish, the Globe had more consistent, interesting choices for magic.
Yeah, with the Globe, I'm specifically thinking of, one, they stage the mask, and it's very beautiful, and it's fun, and like Prospero's dancing, and it's very simple.
Yeah.
And then there's a moment where just like
the petals
are like dropping from various points in the theater.
Yeah.
You can see that people are actually throwing them, like production assistants, I'm assuming. And those petals are so beautiful. And that's like, there's moments where the magic for me, Ariel's harpy in the Globe, I'm kind of like, could this have been more interesting if we let Ariel be in the heavens instead of Prospero being in the heavens watching. I would have liked that personally.
Mm-hmm.
But the petals were just so beautiful.
Yeah, I see that. And I agree. They're also two very different types of magic, so it's kind of hard to pit them against each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so then A plot, Prospero's revenge.
The globe.
Yeah. B plot, Miranda and Ferdinand.
The globe.
C plot, the nobles.
Julie Taymor.
I think I'm still going to go with the globe.
The globe's very close for me. But they're also very similar.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly, there were certain concepts that were, or choices. There were choices in the 2010 Taymor that I saw also in the globe, like their costuming and some of the relationships. So maybe the globe was inspired by Julie Taymor's.
Yeah.
Both of them, though, are very strong, noble scenes.
Yes.
And then D plot, which is the clowns.
The globe.
Yeah. Yeah. So here we have the globe really
absolutely taking this one with a few like maybe leaning a little bit into Taymor for some specific choices.
Yeah. So that's our wrap up of The Tempest. Any final thoughts, Elise?
Yeah, I think something that I've learned is I want empathetic Prosperos, or Prosperos I can empathize with. I think that that's very important. I think that getting hung up on the magic leads to making choices that don't get, or concept with this play can lead to choices that maybe don't serve the play, and it's okay to keep it simple.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. The one thing I will add is comedy, please. It's a comedy.
Comedy, please.
Let's, we can be very aware of the power dynamics, and we should not negate the power dynamics for comedy, but comedy is in there for a reason. Let's use it.
There's at least one plot that is all clowns.
Yeah.
And also, you can make Caliban a clown figure, and that helps. So,
yeah. My last thing is I wish that we had found a post-colonial or a very well-researched and intentional post-colonial production, just so we could see all of that really fantastic post-colonial research that's being done in academia applied to the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish that we had found something more. Post-colonial readings of The Tempest have been kind of the norm since the 80s, and all of these productions are from the
2010s.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. That's The Tempest.
That is The Tempest.
Keep an eye on our social media for hints as to what play we will be starting in 2026.
Thank you all so much for listening, and if you'd like to support the podcast, we have links in the episode description.
I'm Courtney Smith.
And I'm Elise Sharp.
This is Shakespeare Anyone?
Thank you so much for listening to Shakespeare Anyone. Works referenced in this episode are available in the episode description. Our theme music is Never Ending Minute by Sounds Like Sander.
If you would like to support us, visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. You can also hit the subscribe button, like us, leave a comment, write a review, share us on social media, tell a friend about us, all the things. We'd appreciate it. For more, you can visit our website, shakespeareanyone.com, or follow us on Instagram at ShakespeareAnyonePod.
Now, because you listened all the way to the end of the credits, here is a completely random Shakespeare quote for you. From King Henry VI, Part 3, Act 2, Scene 4, said by Richard. Nay, Warwick, single out some other chase, for I myself will hunt this wolf to death.